Afghanistan is in free fall, on the brink of an apocalyptic collapse. The Islamic radicals captured 4 more major cities today, and Kabul could fall within weeks. After his shocking foreign policy failure, President Biden is now sending U.S. troops to rescue Americans. And guess what? The president is also negotiating with the Taliban, talking about giving them aid and money. Why? CBN's Brody explains.
The Taliban taking another 3 provincial capitals today as they're pressing a lightning offense, gradually encircling the capital city of Kabul. Resurgents have captured more than a dozen regional capitals in mere days. The State Department explaining why 3,000 troops are being rushed to Kabul airport to help with a partial evacuation of the American embassy.
As we've said all along, the increased tempo of the Taliban military engagement and the resulting increase in violence and instability across Afghanistan is of grave concern.
In a major shift of power, Taliban forces captured the country's 2nd and 3rd largest cities Thursday, Kandahar and Herat. Hours later, Lashkar-Gah, where hundreds of U.S. troops have lost their lives, now a trophy for war resurgence. 13 of the country's 34 provincial capitals now under Taliban control. The Biden administration now negotiating with Taliban leaders to spare the embassy, saying it must remain open and secure if the group hopes to receive American financial aid and other assistance. The president refused to comment on the situation Thursday.
The potential here for growing terrorist capabilities and terrorist threats deep within the heartland of Afghanistan, the way bin Laden did, is very real.
Taliban militants now control 2/3 of the country. They command the north while battling Afghan soldiers over shrinking territory in the south and west. This footage released by the Afghan government shows airstrikes on Taliban positioned in Kandahar, but it wasn't enough to slow them down. Military personnel estimate Kabul could fall in just 30 days. The looming humanitarian crisis expected to uproot nearly 300,000 families with no place to call home in an effort to support Afghanistan and its people. 1,200 allied Afghan refugees have already come to the U.S. with visas. The government expects to help thousands more.
Additional flights will begin landing daily, and you're going to see the total number grow very quickly in the coming days and the coming weeks.
For now, the U.S. Embassy remains open with plans to keep operating with a core diplomatic presence. But bringing additional troops is a sign the U.S. doesn't believe the Afghan government can hold off the Taliban surge. Brody, CBN News.
Our senior international correspondent, George Thomas, is with us with more. George, is the speed of this Taliban takeover a surprise? Is Afghanistan going to become a base for terrorists to attack America?
Yeah, I mean, to many watching now, the collapse does seem very sudden, Pat, but not to the Taliban. They've been planning for this moment for quite some time. The pivotal moment, Pat, came last year when the United States and the Taliban signed an agreement called the Doha Agreement back in February 2020. And under this agreement, signed by the previous administration, the Trump administration, part of the agreement was that the United States would withdraw all forces from the country by this time right now. And in exchange, the Taliban would, in essence, not allow Afghanistan to be a base of operation for Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and other Islamic terrorist organizations. So the Taliban knew that the perception, the feeling in the United States was that they wanted our troops back home, that they were done after this 20 years of spending all this money, the bloodshed in the country. It was time to bring the troops back. In the past year, the Taliban, they've been working with warlords, with the various chiefs in the various tribes across the country, in essence, gaining their trust. And in the last 3-4 months, what we have seen, and especially in the last couple of days, they've taken all these major capitals of these provinces, in essence, Pat, without firing a bullet. The Afghan army, in essence, handing the keys of the city to the Taliban. They have been demoralized when they knew that the United States and NATO forces were about to leave the country. They said, what is this worth fighting for? They had no trust in the Afghan government. The Afghan government didn't treat them right. They didn't pay them sufficiently, didn't feed them sufficiently. And the question was, why is this worth fighting? Is this worth fighting for? And what you saw in the last few days has been stunning. In essence, the Afghan security forces handing the keys over to the Taliban.
George, what have you learned? We know what's going to happen to women. They don't believe in educating women. They beat up women. They rape women. But what's going to happen to the Christians?
Yeah, I was on the phone with a family just a few hours right before the Taliban took over the city of Herat, a major city in Afghanistan. And they had gotten leaflets. This particular Christian family, Pat, had 5 girls between the ages of 16 and 21, all believers. And the note said that if you have any women in the household that are unmarried, be prepared to hand them over to the Taliban fighters as sex slaves. In essence, Christians are very, very concerned about their future. There are between 3,000, nobody knows for sure, between 5,000 and 8,000 believers scattered across the country. The church has grown in the last 20 years. There's been tremendous growth in the church. And church leaders I've spoken to inside the country are very, very concerned about their future.
It's almost like what ISIS did to the Yazidi women. I mean, they took them as sex slaves.
Exactly.
Same thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is exactly what we saw in Iraq. When we pulled out of Iraq, it became a breeding ground for ISIS. And all experts that I've spoken to, there is no doubt that Al-Qaeda, the resurgence of Al-Qaeda will happen. Jihadist groups around the world will now realize that there is one country in the world that they can go, they can fundraise, they can recruit, they can train. That country could potentially be Afghanistan again.
Thank you, George.
You're welcome.